Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We've got tons of stuff to talk about here. This is a huge long video. Cyclists, Vancouver driving, red lights, lane issues. So lots of stuff to talk about. I've got some markers in the description, some bookmarks, so you can jump to specific sections. But we'll start with this little interaction that happened on a drive a day or two ago. This is coming out of a residential subdivision and an interaction with a cyclist, which was quite interesting and unusual, I found. So normally it's been quite good at intersections, but it possibly has something to do with this new version that has been jumping out at intersections, even into vehicles, when it didn't do that previously. So coming up to this intersection here, we're turning right. And there's a cyclist going to be coming from the left, and I had to disengage. So here it's creeping forward, and it didn't look like it was going to stop. Maybe it was going to go up to that creep distance. And there's that cyclist. He definitely didn't look too happy that the car was pulling up. So I had to disengage there. So that was not so great. The rest of the video here is a drive to Vancouver. It's basically the same route that I had taken in another video on a previous version. I don't know if it was 11 or 12. So you can look back at that and compare the driving. This is interesting because we're starting off early in the morning. It's still dark. It seems to have no problem driving in the dark at all. Doesn't seem to be any perceptible differences compared to driving in the daytime. There was a bit of sprinkling rain here as well, but nothing significant. So in general, overall, on this drive, I found it to be a bit smoother than the previous time I did this on the old version. So certainly there are some improvements. A lot of the issues in general were still around lane selection, which I'm really surprised at. There have been a couple map updates, so I'm surprised there are still this many lane selection issues. Some examples of that are in Vancouver. When there's high occupancy vehicle lanes, it wouldn't get into those lanes or would keep trying to get out of them, so you can check the bookmark for those sections. There are pieces where it would try to drive in a bus lane. There are sections where it would try to drive onto a little pull-off. That's not even a lane at all. There's pieces where it gets confused in the middle of an intersection and selects the wrong lane in a turn. So some not necessarily dangerous, but definitely not legal, and definitely incorrect moves that it's trying to make still. So other than those on the drive, it was fairly decent. There's one part where it went through a fairly almost red light, I believe, so you can check that out in the description as well. And yeah, so we'll let it run there. Obviously this is running at about three times speed, so you can slow it down if you'd like to see it in real time. And mostly I'll just comment on things at the bookmarks, so you can jump to those if you're interested, or watch the whole thing. So here we're coming up to construction zone. It goes down to 60 and then to 50 kilometers an hour. On FSD, it still is horrible at slowing down in time. So right around here somewhere is the 50 sign. No, it's still 80 there. But coming up very quickly, it slows down. So, but the car doesn't slow down at all for quite some time. So that is not very good, and it seems to be worse on FSD compared to when it's running on autopilot. You can tell, of course, by the visualization what program it's running on. When it's on the regular autopilot program, it slows down fairly quickly, and when it's on FSD, it basically doesn't slow down at all. So here we go. There's the change in the speed limit, 60. So you can still going 80, and then it changes to 50, and it's still going 78. Just ever so slowly, it's creeping down. So That happened on the previous version. It almost seems to be worse in this one. The other thing I noticed fairly routinely on this drive is some phantom braking coming up to stoplights, and I don't know if that's due to the dark. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it was happening in the daytime as well. So a number of pieces along this highway stretch going out to the ferries, I noticed a bit of a hesitation coming up to lights, even though it seems to be able to see the light at that point. For some reason it's still doing that. So I'm not sure how they'll be able to fix that, but it should be picking up the light, so that should be fine. The other thing that's happening, and that's been happening for a long time, is that as it's coming up to cars stopped at a light, it's waiting way too long before it slows down, so it has to brake fairly aggressively when you do get there, which isn't dangerous really, but it's uncomfortable. So there's an example of that scenario coming up here quite quickly in the video, or coming up to a light, and you can see how it just waits too long before it slows down. So here's that light coming up. Just around this corner. Comes around this corner, watch for it picking up the lights. There it can see the lights, and then it has to really step on the brakes. So not that great. The next thing we'll see here coming up in a few minutes is the difference between it slowing down for changing speed limits on the old autopilot code, which you can see when the colors disappear off the screen, compared to the FSD code. So a few minutes ago in that construction zone, you could see that on the FSD code it pretty much doesn't slow down at all. It doesn't seem to put the brakes on, it's just minorly coasting. But coming up here close to the ferries, it switches to autopilot code, and then the speed limit changes there. There we go, there's the switch. And I noticed it slowing down, like you'd actually tell it using regen to slow down. I actually had to disengage the FSD here because I had accidentally set it to go into the off-ramp. But here you can see it's slowing down quite quickly as the speed limits are changing. So that's a funny little difference there. This toll booth, of course, it doesn't handle that, so I had to disengage. So here we are on the Vancouver side of the ferry, driving off. You'll notice an interesting thing here with the GPS. The GPS hasn't really picked up yet. The car on the right hand side, the red arrow, is just going all over the place. But it doesn't seem to affect anything. I thought it would mess up the autopilot, the FSD, but it doesn't seem to. It usually has taken a few minutes before it picks up the GPS properly. It seems to be a bit quicker now than it was in the past, but you seem to be able to drive even before it picks up the GPS perfectly. Here I had to reset my little counter because it had accidentally picked up 45 kilometers, which weren't real kilometers. It had picked that up because the GPS was still set to the beginning of the ferry trip, and then it thought we had jumped 40 kilometers. It's just to make sure the data shows up correctly in the tracker. So here in the Vancouver side, I noticed there are some improvements. Some of these lights here, the first 2 or 3 lights here had some really strange behavior on the last version, so that seems to have disappeared. So that's positive. In general, it seemed to be driving fairly smoothly in Vancouver here, just in terms of speed control and so on, so that was pretty good as well. I'll skip a few minutes of commenting here, and you can jump to the next bookmark or wait a minute or two, and we'll have some more comments and interesting pieces coming up. So here we have an exit to the right. And it seemed to have some trouble centering the lane there. It got pretty close to the left side. Not necessarily hazardous, just a bit uncomfortable, so I reported that in my little tracker. And I've been reporting all of these to Tesla as well with the camera icon you can see on the top right there, of course. Even if they're really minor, I like to report them. I don't know if it's necessarily picking those things up. Of course, if you disengage, or you're probably if you're adjusting the scroll wheel speed, it could pick that up theoretically, but I just don't know. I like to report it. I think more data is better than less data. They can sort through it if they feel like it. I have no idea if it actually does anything, but might as well. So coming up here, we have the issues showing with the HOV lane. HOV lanes are pretty common around my area here, high occupancy vehicles. So it's made for people with 2 or more people in the car, but electric vehicles also qualify for them. So here's the HOV lane on the left-hand side. So I manually got into it. On the previous version, it didn't like this at all. It kept trying to get out of the lane, so I wanted to see if it had improved at all, but there you go, same thing, it's trying to get out of the lane. Another reason it's trying to get out of the lane is because it thinks that I have to make a right exit here, which you do except if you're in the HOV lane. In the HOV lane, we can go straight over this bridge and then make a left turn rather than the loop around to the right. So part of that might not actually be the FSD's fault. It's probably basically trying to follow the navigation instructions, which should be updated if you qualify for HOV. Unlikely that'll happen anytime soon. You'd have to somehow tell Google or whatever that you qualify for HOV. So merging, it happened to get lucky there. It's not great at merging still, especially when lanes are ending and you have to merge in. It basically doesn't seem to make any effort. Here it tried to get into that right shoulder lane for some reason, so there's another lane issue. That's the common thread for pretty much all of this. Lane detection, detecting what type of lane it is still a major issue here. So like I said before, in general, I think this drive was a bit smoother than the previous one, but I haven't compared it directly to really make sure. So up around this next corner is where we have the example of the bus lane, I believe, where it tries to get into a bus lane on the right hand side. So it does seem to see the markings for these special lanes, but it doesn't really seem to respect them for whatever reason. So I did disengage or intervene there to stop the merge to the right. It's also still making the same strange decisions that the previous version did, where if a right turn is coming up, it sometimes gets in the left lane just before the right turn and then it can't make it over. So I had to stop it a number of times from doing that type of stuff along the way here. Somewhere up here there's some fairly heavy traffic coming up, so I had to I guess I could have let it go, but it just was impatient and it decided to take over for a couple of merges there. So you'll see that coming up. So there's an example of where it was taking a right exit here pretty quick, but it was trying to get into the left lane, and with the type of merging it's doing, there's no way it would have gotten over to the left and back to the right quick enough to do that successfully. So there's the example with the bus lane again. It's trying to get over to the right into the bus lane. And this exit, these exits are fairly smooth now. That certainly wasn't the case in maybe 2 versions ago. It was often pretty rough. So taking these interchanges is mostly pretty good. There is something funny coming up here in a second. On the second S curve here, it does come up to the lead vehicle quite quickly and really has to hit the brakes, and that's probably because of the corner. So I could see the cars that were slowing down here, but it really came in at 80 kilometers an hour up to those cars and had to slam on the brakes, so that wasn't too comfortable. Here's that heavy traffic merge where I just didn't feel like waiting for it to mess around, so I took over and merged in there. This part is my fault here. I did stop it from merging to the right a number of times, even though that was the correct thing to do. I didn't realize that we were heading off to the right here in a few minutes. So unfortunately I kind of prevented it from doing its job properly in that case. And then I think I had to take over to actually get us into the right lane quick enough. Sorry about that. And so on this exit here going to the right, you'll see some funny behavior as well. I think it's again due to lane detection from what I remember. You'll see that here in a second. So here, oh okay, yeah, it really got confused by this splitting lane and it went to the red steering wheel and completely cut out. So that's the first time I've seen the red steering wheel on this version. Hopefully it doesn't happen too often. So there's nothing too much happening for the next few minutes here, so you can skip ahead to the next bookmark if you like, and more comments coming up there. So this next one I would also attribute to another lane detection error. Basically, we're making a left turn onto a bridge that's heading into downtown here after this light, and it doesn't seem to detect the lane properly. It doesn't make a tight enough turn, and so I had to take over. So you'll see that in a minute. It's always a debate on how much video to leave in these things. A few times I've tried to splice it up into pieces, but I think it's actually nice to show more of the drive, let people skip through if they feel like it, just to really show how it does on a continuous drive like this. And you can see obviously 98-99% of the time it's doing everything properly, but there are still some pretty serious mistakes here and there, so you do really have to pay attention. So here we go, coming around that corner, and I had to take over. It just didn't want to make that tight corner. I find if I just show the disengagements, and it looks like it's doing a horrible job, but the reality is it's quite good, and it's actually quite relaxing to me driving around with FSD Beta on the entire drive, even heavy downtown traffic. Similar to how it is in long distance drives on regular autopilot. I find it helps take a lot of the stress and strain and minute adjustments off in downtown traffic like this. So just a few more little tweaks to get rid of some of those major issues would make it quite usable. Even if it's not FSD, it would make it usable as a nice driver assist feature. So we're pretty much nearing the end of the drive now. The only thing left here is a right turn across some bike lanes and with some pedestrians. So pretty decent interaction with that. So the next section, the next half of the drive will be the return trip coming out of downtown and back to the ferries. This is another piece that it doesn't really do a great job at. We didn't quite see it there, but it doesn't really leave intersections free. So if that light was green, it would have continued into that intersection, not considering that the traffic isn't moving, and the light would likely turn red and have you block the intersection. So that doesn't seem to be accounted for yet. Here's that right turn. There's a cyclist there. There's a number of pedestrians. It does do a good job stopping for them. And that's the end. So here we are on the way back, coming out of downtown. Bit of a swerving lane issue there. It was merging right, merging left. Not quite sure what was happening there. And then right away here, we have a bit of an issue. Nothing hazardous really, but not great either. So on this left turn coming up, it's turning onto a one-way road with 3 lanes of traffic. So the proper way to do that, of course, is to turn into the closest lane and then make whatever moves after that you need to. So you'll notice on this turn it doesn't do that. It cuts across all 3 lanes and gets into the rightmost lane. It was fine in that case, but I think that's not really not technically a proper legal turn there. I could be mistaken though, so I'm not sure. Here we go, straight to the right hand lane. So coming up next here, we have a clip of a red light issue. You can see the light turns orange and then red, and I didn't feel like slamming on the brakes, so I actually accelerated through it a little bit. I don't know why the car didn't stop. It's the first time I've seen that on this version. I did see it previously on the older version in a few different spots. I was hoping that would be gone by now, but it doesn't seem to be. Coming up here in a couple more lights, we have another couple funny issues at an intersection. You'll see that here in a second. Mostly lane detection issues again, like most of these have been so far today. So what happens is we're turning left here. The car stops. You can see the tentacles trying to go around that vehicle, even though we should be staying behind it. And then when it tried to turn, it's also trying to turn before that car in front of us turned, so I had to disengage. So even though I had said that it was overall smoother, but after looking at the video, it does seem to be still quite a few issues and disengagements. So still, unfortunately, not too impressed with it. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content, and let me know in the comments if there's anything specific you'd like to know about or see in future videos. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good day.